All right. Yeah, I was just listening to your talk, and it was pretty cool. If anyone has similar technical questions afterwards, I'd love to have half the time be basically a town hall. I heard some really interesting questions, like, you know, what's the difference between just spinning up your own AWS instance and all this stuff. And but before that, I'd like to just, you know, go over a little bit of what we're doing at Everipedia, why we decided to build on EOS. A little about me. I'm Sam. I'm the president and co-founder. Before actually working on Everipedia, I used to mine, you know, cryptos in college. I was a UCLA student. I graduated in 2015. Yeah, I still remember back before all the Ethereum stuff. You know, during the altcoin boom, I was mining Dogecoin. There's Counterparty and all that stuff. Yeah, so everything's come a really, really long way since then. So this is really just the beginning, even though it seems like the big ICO craze has kind of died down a little bit. Like, you have to have a bigger and better substance to what you're doing before you can get people's attention. It's still really just the beginning. So what we're actually trying to build at Everipedia is basically the world's first decentralized knowledge base. And we started using blockchain stuff in our project and our vision in around like early to mid 2017, when a lot of Ethereum's kinks, you know, with the DAO coming to a conclusion and more updates and stuff, had finished. So people were ICOing a lot on Ethereum and big projects like EOS was released and stuff. So we started working on this actually, you know, around last year. And I originally approached the EOS guys about what we're doing, I think around like July or August 2017. And it's kind of like a very specialized Steam model. And I heard Nathan already referred to Steam, and it's very unique and it's very interesting. And so what EOS does is it kind of generalizes the Steam model to a general compute virtual machine. So people can build consumer applications, DApps, apps, whatever you want to call them, on top of basically the EOS platform. And so we've been working on it for a while now, and so we finally started to write, you know, deployable code, partially on local environments. And so how it actually works with Everipedia is I think it's going to be a model that a lot of people will adopt for their specific projects. It kind of takes a lot of inspiration from Steam, which is basically the first content-driven model. But basically, people hold tokens, and our token is called the IQ token, and stake them to approve edits or create edits, as well as reward people during the IQ minting schedule, as well as there's going to be basically a consensus mechanism for how an edit gets approved to enter the blockchain. So what happens is the entire article gets hashed, and so there was a designated hash for that current article's state, such as like an IPFS hash. It gets actually added on-chain through the Everipedia network contract. People who vote on whether that should be added or not can stake tokens, and the minting schedule rewards people who propose the actual edit state or the edit of the article, basically. So it's like a more specialized scheme, and it uses the same type of principle in basically creating an entire decentralized database, essentially, and an economic incentive layer that a lot of sites can plug into. So obviously the Everipedia network will first have the Explorer on Everipedia.org, like how Steemit.com is the first site that people can interact with the Steem blockchain. But the real idea and the real vision is that we can hopefully have a lot of websites, such as, you know, even Wikipedia maybe, or other things, actually build on top of this large knowledge base that's completely public, that's run on EOS, and it's completely free, and it's self-sustaining and self-governed by people who have tokens. And so it'll basically be even a larger repository of knowledge than the 5 million or so articles that are on Wikipedia currently. And so I usually show people, like, if you guys are familiar with Steam, you can use different websites that plug into the same Steam database. So if you go to like e.tube, which is like they recently released their product, which is a decentralized YouTube. Steemit.com obviously is the no-brainer. Busy.org, it looks more like a Twitter, like a decentralized Twitter. All of these plug into the Steam blockchain, but they're different sites. They're designed differently, but if you post to them, it posts to the Steam blockchain, and basically you can get rewarded Steam tokens for having good content. For DTube, it's videos. For busy.org, it is short, concise, microblogging, and for Steemit.com, it's more, medium-style blog posts. Now that system is really well made for blogs and unique content. We're essentially designing the first thing for knowledge base, things that are of encyclopedic article. Like you can make an article about anything, whether it's like a company, a historical empire or event or something, or yourself, or your own startup, such as like a better Crunchbase, essentially. All of this is we're basically tailoring the Steam model to knowledge. And so that's essentially what we're doing, and we're hoping that we can deploy that around June when the EOS mainnet is launched. And we're also doing a very large airdrop. We're actually airdropping a majority of IQ tokens that are required to govern the network and actually use the network right at EOS Genesis, basically. So if you hold EOS tokens during Genesis, you will get IQ tokens, which is right now the only way to get IQ tokens. And so, yeah, we hope to have a lot of progress done in the near future. And if that interests you guys, it'd be cool to you guys on our Telegram. It's just at Everipedia. And I'm always on there to get technical questions, theory questions, and yeah.
Nice. Cool.
Yeah, thanks. So I think you're welcome to ask any questions you have for Sam. Can you hear me, Sam?
Yeah. So I'd love to take a kind of town hall style thing, especially because I know you guys talked a lot about technical EOS questions as well as any Everipedia general questions. I'd love to just have some kind of back and forth. I usually get really good questions. So if anyone's wondering anything, whether general platform level or Everipedia specific, feel free to ask me.
I'll just ask, you mentioned Sam, actually you didn't mention it at all, but what are some of the, I think Andrew asked a question, what are some of the advantages of EOS over something like Ether or Ethereum?
Yeah, so back mid last year when we were starting to explore what platform to use, basically the two really good things that I'm really confident in is Plasma on Ethereum, basically creating your own chain on top of Ethereum's protocol security, and then relaying the state of your own chain to the Ethereum main network, and then also EOS. I personally think those two projects are basically the best way to build a decentralized application right now. I know there's Neo and all these other things, but generally I think far ahead of everyone else is basically EOS and Ethereum. In specific EOS advantage, I think that the fee model at the protocol level being more conducive to fee list by design and more holding the tokens as a cost is much better for consumer-based applications. Although my personal opinion is it's not that it's fee list, since there is still a cost to hold the tokens, right? In EOS, the technical way to think about it, accounts are rate limited based on token balance, while in Ethereum, accounts, which are basically public addresses, are not rate limited, but you just have to pay for compute resources, so miners execute your instruction on the Ethereum virtual machine right up front. That, although you can basically program an Ethereum contract to pay the gas costs for your users and stuff, I just think that definitely much easier for a consumer-based application to be deployed on EOS, especially given the different advantages it has, such as like human readable account names, all the different things that allow people to have basically user authentication and all the things that are built right into the protocol layer. Other than that, since they're general compute platforms, you can kind of mimic the exact same functionality if you really build it into the other one, right? Like you can have an Ethereum contract pay the gas cost for your users if you really wanted to. So it's just as a matter of what is the base protocol really specialized in building, and it's pretty clear to me and our team that EOS is kind of a general compute for consumer applications, while Ethereum is basically much more general, just virtual machine for anything, which makes it a little difficult to build, consumer applications since you have to kind of reinvent each part of the wheel.
Thanks.
That makes a lot of sense. Are you writing your smart contracts in C++?
Yeah, right now we write them in C++ and they compile to WebAssembly, which is basically what's deployed to the EOS chain, and then block producers execute the compiled WebAssembly. So basically C++ right now acts as Solidity equivalent, and then WebAssembly is basically the compiled bytecode. There is talk of having the EOS libraries and associated libraries in other languages to compile to WebAssembly. Just like there's talk of in Ethereum, like there's Viper that's being worked on and other languages that compile to EVM bytecode. But right now it's C++. It works pretty well. We're going to try to mainly move off of local environments and actually just deploy to the public test network. But yes, all of our contracts are written in C++, then compiled to WebAssembly.
I was reading that EOS has similarity with Cardano, or the reverse, but the main advantage of Cardano that they are evangelizing is the Haskell functional language that makes smart contracts more safe. You can do theorem proving of them, and so do you think that the C++ in EOS can reach the same level of contract security like Cardano with Haskell?
Yes. So there's a few projects touting. Are you referring to the formal verification issue with smart contracts and how they should be expected to behave?
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Right. So there are a few projects that are actually touting that Tezos is one and Cardano is another one. I actually think that, formal verification is interesting. You can kind of do it. I think people are trying to have formally verified scopes in some Ethereum, basically Solidity type functionality. But I think that EOS's unique way of doing scope editable contracts is actually really interesting because it kind of brings a social answer to a technical problem. And honestly, I think it's a little bit more reliable than actually formally verifying something. And I think Nathan quickly mentioned it, which is if there is some type of misbehavior or something, you can have block producers or voters basically agree to edit parts of the smart contract. And what that allows you to do is when you deploy a smart contract, you can have scopes on accounts that you can change certain areas. So for example, you don't have to allow anyone to ever change the token balances, right? Because you don't really want a central account to change the token balances, but perhaps there's a very unique function that lets you take the tokens or do something with the tokens and it's completely newly written, and you want to give multi-account, multi-sig authority to change that code if there's a bug of some sort. This allows you to do that. It allows you to edit smart contracts in specified scopes. And to my knowledge right now, it's basically the most further along in that feature. So you can actually specify when you deploy a contract places that different accounts can edit and places where no one can edit, just obviously token balances or value balances and stuff. So I actually like EOS's approach to it better. It doesn't seek a mathematical answer. It's a social answer or a social problem, because if you're trying to formally verify your contract, that assumes that you know all different bounds of potential behavior, and you prove each one as safe. But what usually happens is you kind of forget to prove every type of possible action, and you can prove that certain actions and certain bounds are safe, but most of the bugs actually appear in areas where actions were not actually intended for internet. So although I don't really know about formal verification in C++ and how hard it is in EOS, I actually really like their specific way they're handling this specific.
So in other words, you can actually do a systemic upgrade to your smart contract in EOS.
Yes.
Which I think is a really problematic in Ethereum, right?
You can do similar things. It's just, for example, in Ethereum you have to redeploy things, and you have to specify the libraries to use. You can do a lot of the same actions in each one, but it's much more to manage. For example, on stuff like you can get the same like I was saying, but paying versus gas, stuff like that. And also smart contract, how you could Delta upgrade that contract and move people to a new asset like that. But it's actually possible to do. If there's a bug in a specific location, you have to be able to deploy a new contract immediately without actually fix the old one. On EOS, it's part of the, like, you can deploy contract this account that's owned by this address and edit these functions and these in this scope. And nothing else. So you don't actually have to worry about token balance, right? You can only edit certain scopes. And people, you can expect that. You can know, okay, this account might be tomorrow and this part. So you can actually know what you're interacting with, and possibly things can get maintained, but not necessarily centralized and transparent.
And how mature is it in terms of, if I have an application that's a hybrid between a centralized application such as a Facebook Messenger chatbot, enabled by Ruby on Rails, and I want to integrate a smart contract. Right now, if I'm using Ethereum, I have to go and kind of do an API to Metamask and have a Metamask server somewhere. How would that work with EOS?
Yeah, so for EOS, you actually have a model where you will connect to the Ethereum network, and then or some you can run your own full node or something if you can basically want to use there. But the model is the same. The idea is you connect to the main network, whether through some Web3 interface or something like that, and then you get a transaction, block the users, calculate it, and then basically add it to the blocks. The model in that situation, I think it's fairly good. The only real difference is that because there's only one block there's basically you're basically listening for VM to update basically the mainnet. While with Ethereum, listening to blocks coming from anywhere, from mining pools, from anything, and then just updating the data of the virtual machine, given the blocks instruction.
Are you able to decipher what he's saying?
It's really hard to understand.
Yes, Sam, our connection's really bad. Is that on our end, or is that?
You could turn off this video so that this.
It's fun, but I can see myself there.
Just like the bandwidth, you could reduce it a bit.
Over there, so kind of like.
Let me check if I can turn. I would do this, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I turned our video off, so maybe the bandwidth will be rededicated to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't hear myself anymore, so that's good. I can just, is that better?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Oh, that might have been
It's
what it
much better,
was. Yeah. Okay. Wait, did you have any clarifying questions for the last question you asked? Because I know that was an important one for you.
Thank you. Yeah, just quickly, are there tools? Are there other APIs? Is there a maturity in the tools that are tool sets available to do those kinds of integrations between, say, Facebook and the EOS infrastructure?
So I know, so there's a lot of it worked on.
What's say, Sam? The connection's still pretty bad. Maybe I'll just drop the call and try calling you back and see if that
Sure.
does anything.
Sure.
But that's a great question to say too. Okay, so we were still trying to get your answer on the tool sets.
Integration tools, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not part of Block One or anything, but I know that a lot of stuff like that is being worked on. A lot of people are creating like wallets that basically allow both accounts to be basically like more like a classical social media account that have actual human readable account names with reputation. That's something actually that Dan is working on to have a chain-wide reputation kind of system built in. And so you can actually have tooling that leverages that straight, like kind of like a much more improved Metamask. I'm not really sure of the status, but all of these things are planned, but I'm not a part of Block One, so I don't actually know what their timeline is on that stuff, but it's definitely planned. I think it'll come faster than most people think.
Thank you.
There is also a question about, is there something similar like an ERC20 token on EOS, or how would one initiate an ICO on EOS?
Oh, it's actually, well, so we're not doing an ICO, but we've actually seen the contracts and stuff, and it's actually fairly simple. I would venture to actually say even easier because they've already come up with templates that help people create their own currencies and tokens. You can actually try it. There's a sample contract called Currency, and I think it's been improved recently. And it should work the same way, right? You create a contract that if you send it EOS tokens, then it'll send you back your account some other kind of currency, presumably one you're making. And the cool thing is, since you'll need EOS to run your DApp, because on EOS accounts are rate limited based on the accounts' token balance, that's how you actually get to run your DApp for a good amount of time. Whereas for Ethereum, as far as I know, most people sell the Ether that they get, right, for cash or whatever. But for EOS, you actually can start using a lot of the EOS that you get. You can sell the rest, obviously, to fund development. But that'll actually allow you to run your app for free, not charge for it, kind of like how most people are used to doing with apps and consumer internet-based stuff.
And is there a minimum like stake to hold for deploying the smart contract for an ICO or a DApp?
Can you say the question louder?
Is there like a minimum stake that you have to commit to the smart contract to run your ICO or later on to have your DApp on the EOS?
I don't know, to be honest, since we're not doing an ICO, but all I know is we just for fun even tried to create a contract where like you can create tokens, move them around, send them to other addresses, and we managed to do that even without the newest release, but like a while ago in like an hour, like max.
I got a quick question. I don't really understand how the Block.1 $1 million fund works. Did they just like give money to these VCs, or are the VCs contributing that on top of the billion, or are they like splitting it, or how exactly does that work?
Okay, so yeah, again, like I'm not a part of Block One, but as far as I know, so EOS obviously is doing a very successful ICO. A lot of the apps that are building on top of it, including us, have a really community-heavy basis to them. I think a lot of the first biggest dApps and DACs will be community-based ones rather than financial ones, although we're seeing a lot of big financial ones like EOS Finex, which is like, a very ambitious decentralized exchange by Bitfinex, but most of them are community DApps. And so there's going to have to be a lot of growth of community fostering. So how the reason we decided to do an airdrop is because we wanted to give back value to the actual community of the platform we're building on. And basically, if you can get funding for building the actual development of the application, you don't really need to do an ICO in the classical sense. And I'm personally of the opinion, like, most of the ICOs that are done aren't really even necessary. So you kind of treat the EOS VC kind of as like a traditional VC, but with token economics attached to it. And it's you don't really even need any kind of special connects or anything like that. I think we were working on EOS as one of the, I think pretty much the earliest, not one of the people. And Dan is always on the Telegram channel. Anyone can talk to him, show him projects, and it's all about just I think that they're just trying to foster community and really important applications that basically are being built on EOS. So it's basically anything that they think really has a lot of potential with a competent team, and they just invest similar to a normal VC. I think that's basically how I've understood it to be, and it's very accessible. So like I was saying, you can talk to Dan on Telegram. Like Nathan was saying, you can email them, and it's not always going to be like that. So for a lot of people that think that, oh, it's too late or something like that, it hasn't even started yet. Like it's like you can still talk to Dan and Brendan and everyone on the Telegram. They show up, like, Dan shows up every other day or something like that. He's on the EOS developers channel. And it's so early. It's like, and you can ask them about it and all this stuff. It's very friendly. They're very, very approachable. They're great guys. So yeah.
Perfect.
How in EOS? How would you prevent a malicious actor from kind of utilizing his power through owning a lot of tokens or kind of manipulating people voting? If he was to convince enough people to vote him in to be a block producer, how does that get prevented from one person kind of controlling too many block producing nodes?
Yeah, so a lot of the economics of this stuff is pretty much untested in like a general compute platform, right? There's Steam, which more tokens means more influence, like quite literally, and that might not be the best way to govern a general compute like virtual machine platform, but I think that as it grows, we'll have to see, because originally during June, I'm pretty sure there'll be very clearly 21 or 20 and some standby candidates that are clearly different entities. How it'll work as tokens change hands and stuff is a very unknown but interesting situation. I think that a lot of the kinks, like paying for votes and stuff, have to be ironed out. I don't really know the current solution, but some of the stuff that they've floated around is pretty cool. Part of the Constitution and how you can verify that paying for votes hasn't happened on chain, so that if it does, other block producers could ignore them and stuff like that. And it's also another thing to note: in order for there to actually be an attack of some sort, I think it's like 11 or 15, I don't know the exact number right off the top of my head, but block producers have to actually join a cartel. Otherwise, they'll just be skipped. If it's very clear that they're doing something that the main chain doesn't want, they'll just be skipped. And since block times are 0.5. If you skip 0.5 seconds, if you skip one, it's like a second slower than usual. So it's pretty redundant. So you can skip some bad actors and vote them out and have time to move them through. So in that sense, it's pretty good. And this unknown stuff like paying for votes or what if tokens start getting hoarded across a long time, those are pretty difficult things to tackle. I think Ethereum will have to tackle a lot of that as well as they transition to full Casper stuff.
Thanks.
Back to smart contracts correctness. Functional programming provides more safety. Are you aware of the trend to push latest version of C++ to use functional programming? Are you aware of the projects that go this way?
I haven't really kept up with it, but I've been pretty interested in formal verification to see if it's possible on EOS. As far as I understand it, if there is a way to actually compile some type of functional language in the future to WebAssembly and formally verify the code before it gets compiled to WebAssembly, essentially, it would yield the same type of safe and correctness behavior. So anything that actually ends up as WebAssembly should be good to deploy to block producers and have them execute and update the EOS virtual machine. So at this time, I'm not aware of any of that stuff going on. But I do understand, and if I'm understanding it correctly, is that it's possible to definitely incorporate that kind of stuff as basically a feature of compiling some language to WebAssembly. So it's possible that it'll be in the future. I don't actually know if Dan has any plans on doing it, but since the WebAssembly community itself is just a general programming community, it's not a blockchain community, it's not anything. The more languages that are able to be cross-compiled and transpiled into WebAssembly, the more EOS actually directly can incorporate that into its own basically feature set.
So I had a question as well. Nathan talked about he had one slide on just the deployment process and kind of like the CDN concept and where you could host your files and stuff like that. So from the perspective of a web developer and someone who's actually building a real end user application, could you talk a bit more about that and comment on how that works? Where are you actually deploying things? Where does your PHP or Ruby on Rails or whatever web application actually execute? Like where is all of that housed?
Yeah, so I think a good model to check out is the Steam blockchain and steemit.com because it's kind of similar to that. So a lot of the voting for articles and storage of article hashes, which are basically pointers to article blobs that are hosted on EOS.io storage and IPFS nodes, all of that stuff happens on-chain. So that happens on the EOS blockchain, on the EOS smart contract. Now, when people actually want to interact with it, they're going to need a user interface, usually a thin web application that's, coded in PHP, Ruby on Rails, Python, Node, or any of that stuff. That stuff can actually just sit on a centralized server or an AWS instance, as it does literally nothing except design basically how the human views the actual smart contract data and then generates a transaction to send to the chain. So it does nothing of like value changing on the chain for it to require decentralization, because should the instance for the UX get blocked or basically should the UX not be favorable anymore, someone else can just spin up a different designed UX. So as far as the actual PHP code that you're referring to or the Ruby web app goes, you can deploy that to any normal web server. And that's how steemit.com, the website itself, is if you go to steemit.com right now, it's just a web app. It's just, I believe it's written in JavaScript, Angular or something, if I'm not mistaken. But it's just a web app, but what it does is it connects to the Steem blockchain. And on the Steem blockchain, which have full nodes run by witnesses and block producing nodes and stuff, that's where the things of value happen. That's where accounts receive Steem tokens. None of that stuff is on a centralized AWS instance. So that stuff can actually happen in a trustless manner. And that model is kind of how a lot of dApps and DACs will work on EOS, and how we're actually planning on building it. So our website, Everipedia.org, is a Python-based app. We'll probably rewrite a lot of it to have Node and a thin front end for viewing and voting on articles with like a wallet. Whether we build the wallet into the web app or not, that's just a design decision. Or if people will use one of those, Metamask versions for EOS, essentially, it's irrelevant. It's just a design decision. And then they'll just use it to view things, and then they'll send edit transactions or earn tokens to their public address through the website. So it's a dual-layered thing where the blockchain acts as both the database and the unit of account store, where accounts change their units of tokens and incentive earnings and all that stuff, and votings on the database of state change. And then they view them through many different websites. You can have 100 different websites pointing to the same articles. That's how you have basically steemit.com and d.tube and busy.org all pointing to the same Steem blockchain. Essentially, they're just front ends.
So you'd essentially replace your traditional database with the EOS platform, and do a lot more with it.
Yeah, that's a fairly simplistic way to look at it, but one thing that it does is it replaces the database, and then it also allows you to have units of account that are global. So, tokens are essentially some type of functional unit of account, programmable, so they have features. And not only can you store, obviously the article's hash in Everipedia's case, or a crypto kitty or something like that on CryptoKitty, but you can also have basically the movements of units of account on EOS as well. Yeah. So both storage for article pointers, or the tokens itself.
Pretty cool.
Just a quick question regarding the storage on IPFS. On EOS, does it have some sort of access control where the file stored can be only accessed by certain accounts, or that's not there?
So EOS is supposed to have EOS storage. I don't believe it is ready at this current time. They're still working on it. I think it might be in the next release called Dawn 3. And essentially what the idea here is, block producing nodes are already giving bandwidth for users to accounts that have token balances, and they can also give decentralized storage using the IPFS protocol, which is just it's a thin protocol like HTTP that guarantees the content that they're serving is the right one by checking the hash of the entire file. The idea is block producing nodes should be able to give accounts bandwidth, computation, and storage. I don't think the storage is ready, but that's the idea. So it's basically a full type of service. So the IPFS storage and stuff should act as somewhat of a CDN, although I think the IPFS protocol needs a little bit of tweaking to really get up to speed of current CDN.
Yeah, but is there access control on the files stored on the IPFS?
Could you repeat that?
Is there access control on the files stored on IPFS, to allow just certain users to access those files that you are publishing?
He's asking permissions.
Yes.
Account permissions for certain files. Can files on IPFS be limited?
I believe so, but I'm not positive since the first version hasn't been released, but I believe so, yes.
Sam, you mentioned token economics. Could you give a brief rundown of how token economics is different for businesses and like, I guess, how you're funding the project really beyond, like into the future, what the plan is there?
Yeah, so basically, like I explained in the question before, there's two aspects to a lot of these. One is the on-chain economics and how it is self-sustaining on the actual blockchain, and then there's businesses or UX layer services that arise that can monetize their own things in whatever ways. You can kind of think of this as kind of like Bitcoin as well. Like Bitcoin itself doesn't have a business model. No one is CEO of the Bitcoin network. That's not like a coherent concept. But there are a lot of UX layer stuff, right? Like Coinbase is a web wallet, and they charge fees. All this like other wallets, blockchain.info is a website and like plugs into the Bitcoin network. The on-chain economics are much different than the UX layer economics. So as far as on-chain economics go, the economic value of what's happening are purely in the token, the unit of the count of the application that you're building. The off-chain stuff you're building, like the UX layer, you can treat that as basically a traditional business. So if you want to sell equity or something like that, or if you plan to have services that actually make money, or transaction fees in which you change the dollars, or maybe you don't, maybe you just keep them in the crypto that you're targeting fees with. They're two very different things. And before, it was only the UX layer stuff that basically mattered. That's where all the thought was, because the database was also just owned by the UX layer person. It was the same. Now those things are being separated, and you can basically invest in two different parts of the same type of ecosystem. So a lot of the times people forget that basically there's the token, and then there's businesses or like an economy built on top of the network. So they're very different things. And so you can be successful in either layer or both. But the first thing is properly understanding you can separate them, and not everything has to be on chain to be successful. Mainly, it is okay that there's basically a crypto economic application. What should be the case is, and what we're trying to do with Everipedia, is that you should be able to give the same guarantees as the old centralized version of the application, but with better security and gamification guarantees than before. And so an example of that is we still aim to have Everipedia free to edit. And one of the things is we don't want people to have to pay like a gas cost or something to edit Everipedia. But now that there's a token, we want to make it significantly more difficult to attack or game than Wikipedia is. Wikipedia has a lot of issues with stock puppeting, trading, and vandalism and stuff like that. So our goal is essentially to have the same free access, but much more difficult, basically difficult and more expensive attack vectors to basically keep the community, positive and honest and transparent. So that's kind of the design philosophy that we go to. We don't want to just have it be a worse version, because it would be weird if you had to pay for everything and you had to do all these other things and then calling it a better version.
Thanks, Sam. I think we have time for one more question, if anyone has one last one. We've got to be out of here by 8 our time. Anyone else?
I have a question about the consensus in EOS, again about attacking the blockchain. So you said if one of the miner behaves unfairly, So is any way to attack the blockchain so that the system, so that the voice of one treated unfairly is not heard or something? Who is the arbiter? Who is in charge to decide if some unfair situation happened?
Yeah, so so there is actually more than one thing to clear up is there's actually a lot of mechanisms built into the block production. Anyone that produces blocks essentially has some kind of power to censure or arbitrage or arbitrate judgment and like basically weigh different things against each other depending on what they include in their blocks or not. One thing to note is there's 20 chosen producers, and there's a lot. The 21st slot is a lot of standby producers, which can do other things while they wait for their chance to come up. And a lot of these things allow for basically ease of like movement and response if something goes wrong in the 20 voted on block. Like I was saying before, there has to be a large number of block producers that actually agree to cartel, form a cartel to actually censure or silence anyone. Otherwise, people will just skip the other voters and the other block producers will delegate skip the other producers and then vote them out. Additionally, a lot of the standby producers are standby, right? So they can actually come in and produce blocks if they're voted in quickly enough. So there's a lot of like sideline stuff happening that makes it even more significantly difficult to actually attack than the general criticism of being easy to censure or basically easy to form a cartel around a lot of this stuff. Because it's easy to move out of the voted producers if it's actually deemed as something that needs to happen.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sam, for having this conversation with us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. So if you guys are interested, join our Telegram channel, and it was great talking to you guys. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sam.
Bye. Okay, so we're our time is up at 8, so I think that's pretty much the end of the session. And thanks everyone for coming out.
Thanks for organizing this, David.
I hope it was great to you guys.
So continue as 2 weeks.